Good afternoon and welcome to the MarkLogic community event for September. Welcome from the CSM team. We've got a really packed agenda today, so let me just go through what we're going to cover. We have been doing these for a while now, and we've built up a bit of a library of content that you can find on our YouTube channel. Be some links in a minute where we've had people from the APA, we've had industry experts such as Helen Appel, our partners such as Datavid and Clever Llamas, and customers like ESI Labs and the APA. All of these are available on demand on our YouTube channel. You scan the quick QR code and we'll make sure to send you links to all of these after the event as well. But we need your input to make these events happen, to make sure that we're getting the right information to the right people. We want to, engage with you, our customers, our developers, our community. We want to hear about your real-world implementations. We want to hear about the stories that you've got, the challenges and successes that you've had. Tell us how long these sessions would last, what content you would like us to cover, who are the experts that you want to hear from, and we'll see if we can reach out and get them on. And ask your questions. Please submit your questions in the chat to our speakers, and we'll be happy to cover those off at the end. I said this earlier on earlier shows, we will make sure to cover as many questions as we can. It might involve going over the hour. If you've got a hard stop, then don't worry, we'll make sure you get the recording and you can hear all of those questions. The speakers today, we've got Paul Magrath from ICLR, and he's going to be discussing Case Genie, which is an AI-driven search facility that analyzes legal text uploaded by users and makes recommendations. Built on MarkLogic and a number of other technologies, ICLR have got a really interesting application here, and so it would be great to hear from Paul. Also joining us will be Frank Blau from EBCONT. Frank will discuss the powerful narrative that can bridge the gap between theory and technical perspectives when discussing multi-model data challenges. He's the messages, the medium can frame a strong use case for the use of MarkLogic in a project, and so really putting MarkLogic into context in the real world. So it'd be great to hear from Frank. And then lastly, we've got Mitch Shepherd from our project management team. Mitch is going to provide us with an overview of the MarkLogic Python client API and library. This is a new API that we've just launched, and he's going to take us through all the key features and a short overview of that. I'm just going to introduce, again, if you missed us last month, I'm going to introduce the community portal. This is a way for new customers, for existing customers, to interact with MarkLogic. You will get the latest news, events, product updates, blogs, anything like that will all be shared through the community forum. It's also a forum for you guys to talk to us. So if you have questions about the product, use cases you'd like to explore, can't find information somewhere, then let us know. It's easy to access documentations, downloads, and other repositories, not just in the Progress MarkLogic world, but outside of it as well. It's open to everyone. You can create a Progress ID to contribute. And then we're asking people to contribute in other ways, not just via events like this, but maybe it's a knowledge-based submission, or it's a blog, or it's a white paper you'd like to work with us on. And we're just getting started with this. So yeah, you can sign up using the link below. This is the front page. You'll find the top knowledge-based articles here, as you can see, community event. And then our new forum where you can ask those questions and engage with us as well. To support the launch of this and ongoing is a reward program to get you guys engaged and give you some rewards for doing so. This is a bit of a gamification. Maybe it's a bit of pride because you can earn some badges along the way. You can make a like, ask a question, answer a question. All of these things will earn you points towards getting your technical badges. Once you reach level 5, there are gift sets that are available for you free of charge. So as you level up, you get more and more. And in fact, they just announced the level 9, which is a very large plushie of the robot there. I hope it's the one with the smiley face. So, and there's other ways of earning points as well. So, attending some of these sessions, presenting at some of these sessions, doing all the stuff that we've talked about earlier can help you earn points. And as a thank you to everybody that's joined so far, not just today, but for every single one of our community events, we'll be uploading points onto your account to reflect as a thank you for joining us. So yeah, hopefully go to the community portal and hope you enjoy the interactions there. So without further ado, I will hand over to Paul Magrath. He's head of product development and online content at the ICLR. Paul, over to you.
Thanks very much. How much time do I have? Do you remind me? Sorry.
Probably about 15 minutes, something like that, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, just to set my clock going. Okay. Thanks very much for the introduction, and I'm going to share my screen now for a little presentation to describe what I do and our MarkLogic journey. I can't see why my screen isn't coming up to share. So I've got a problem with that at the moment. Just going to go down to that. Try that now. Okay.
Perfect. There we go. We can see your screen now.
Good. Right. So ICLR online. This is our. So to begin with, ICLR, the Incorporated Council of Law Reporting for England and Wales, is a very old.
Sorry, Paul. Your screen's gone again. I don't know why.
Oh. Okay.
Apologies. If you just share your screen like you did last time, it should work.
Okay, I'm trying to. What if I do it like? Does that work?
Yeah, perfect. There we go.
Okay, I'll stick with that version then, because it seems if I try and do presenter view, it disappears. So ICLR is a traditional legal publisher. We were set up in 1865 to publish reports of the most important cases decided in the senior courts. So what we've always done is we've printed the reports on paper, and people bind them into volumes, and they are used to line lawyers' offices up and down the land, and occasionally the lawyers actually look at them. And in the 1990s, we started to digitize all the content through a third party. We put it onto CD-ROMs, and that was considered the future, and that was very exciting because you could do all sorts of things like searching through all the content using your computer keyboard. In addition to publishing case reports of individual cases, we also published in hardback books lots of indexes, which were basically information about the cases, about the subject matter, the titles, how they were related to legislation or other cases. And these are a bit like telephone directories, in that you can sort of look up somebody by name, or you can look them up under a list of what they do, or businesses, or things like that. It was, the way things were done, it was quite cumbersome. When we wanted to put everything online, we then had the problem of trying to extract all this information from separate sort of vaults about a case. There would be information about its case name, information about the other cases that it had considered, information about its subject matter, information about the legislation that it considered. And this was all stored in separate, basically separate chapters within the index. We had to pull all of this information together each individual case onto a single, what we called an index card for that case. And all of those index cards, the only way that we could think of indexing them at that stage was to use a traditional SQL database. So that was what we had. And the problem really, when we went online, was in matching up the information for an individual case, such as you might see on the right-hand side of the page, and the information that was kept in the index, which you'll see on the left-hand side of the page there. So for each case, we have both the case report itself and then all this ancillary information and its relationship to other cases, which is very important in the law because, for example, an important precedent might be set by the Court of Appeal, but then on appeal, it would go up to the Supreme Court or the House of Lords, and they might reverse it. So whenever you look at a case, you need to know whether something has happened to it, whether a later case has come along and basically approved it or disapproved it. So it was quite a complicated process, bringing everything into one place when people were trying to look at a case. Nevertheless, we managed to bring everything onto one platform, and you were able to look for cases using one search form, to look for legislation using another, and we had these sort of little cards for every new piece of content in a sort of browse list on the home page. And we were very happy with that until, sorry, I jumped ahead too far, until we came to a conference, I think in about 2016, there was a conference, a MarkLogic conference that we went to. And that was the moment when I had a sort of, I saw the light. It was explained that, you could have all these different types of content, XML case reports, PDFs, Word documents, text documents, and SQL databases, all that. You could bring it all together and do a search across everything. And that was the benefit of MarkLogic. So we basically built a completely new platform through our developers, 67 bricks, and basically revolutionized the way that we presented the content online. So this was a journey really from a print publisher to doing stuff in CD-ROMs and then going online, and then eventually managing to bring all the data together into a single searchable format. So basically each case has a sort of envelope of data, and that includes all the index material. And so this is the home page. It shows you can select matters by topic. You can look at the new content that's recently been added. Doesn't look that new because it's quite an old photograph, but you can then search for the cases. But when you view a case, you can first of all, you can view the case report itself, and then you can flip to the index page, which now collects all the index information about the case, all the metadata, all the sort of satellite data that relates to that case. So we were very pleased with it at that point because we had all our content in one place. We had a way of searching all of it together and of marrying up the case reports with the index material that allowed people to find the content. But we then had a moment when we thought, well, okay, this is as far as we've gone so far, but we've got all this data, and there are cases that people can't find because using traditional search methods, you don't always get to the content unless it's been categorized and indexed in a particular way. So if you look at this index page, you'll see that the subject matter has been classified according to a heading with European Union at the top, and there's a sort of hierarchical heading structure there. It's been classified under European Union and also under extradition. But if you were to try searching for it under crime or something else like that, you might have the difficulty that unless you use the right search terms, you wouldn't necessarily find it. So we decided we set up a little research and development lab at ICLR, and we decided to investigate what we could do with it. And we went down the line of investigating the possibilities of natural language processing. And through that, we came to develop what became Case Genie. And the purpose of that was basically, when you're looking for a case, there are cases that you already know about. This is, from a legal perspective, a lawyer's research point of view. There are cases that you know about. There are cases that you know you can find out about because there will be information somewhere that you will lead to them, that will lead you to those cases. But there are also what you might call the unknown unknowns, which is the cases that you don't even know that you don't know about. And the big fear for a lot of lawyers, a lot of barristers, is that they'll go into court and they'll be presented with something that the other side has found that they weren't aware of. So this is a big danger. When you're doing research, you need to know about things that you don't know about. So basically, we built a system called Case Genie. The solution is that usually you will have some kind of document in your possession. It will be your brief, your skeleton argument, the statement of a problem in a text form. And the idea is that you should be able to upload this to our system where it will be analyzed. The cases you've already cited will be extracted and checked against the system to see if their status is still good. And then it will suggest to you other cases that share the same subject matter, the same concepts and ideas, which are similar in terms of, if you can imagine the sort of the DNA of a legal problem. Is it a problem about crime, or is it a family law problem? But delving a little bit deeper than that, what kind of problem is it? We can analyze the document, and then we can suggest cases that are similar. So this is what happens. You can upload a piece of text, or sorry, I've jumped there. Analyze a piece of text. You can just paste it in, or you could fetch a document, and you put it through this pipeline of processes where the document is encrypted, because we know lawyers are concerned about the security of their data. So we encrypt the document, and then we convert it. We put it through these various processes. We classify the parts of speech, identify the named entities. All of this is sort of standard natural language processing kind of process. And we identify the vectors. Essentially, we have 600 vectors, which we use to analyze and to compare the content that you've supplied with other cases. And then it suggests results. So it will give you up to 50 results. And these are listed in front of you, and you can scroll down. You can filter them according to the legal topic or the court or other things like that, in the same way as a traditional search. It will also extract for you a list of anything that you've cited in your document. It will check that against the index and see whether those cases are still good law. And it will identify, as in the lower half of the page, it will identify any legislation which has been cited in the case. When you look at the case report itself, this is an example of where the legislation has been, if it's been cited, the legislation cited there, the Channel Tunnel Act, you can actually link directly to the legislation. We pull this content in from the National Archives, who publish the official legislation for the UK at legislation.gov.uk. And then when you look at the cases that are recommended, this is an example of the newer version of the index card, where we have extracted a lot of information about each case, some of it automatically. So looking further down this index card.
Sorry, Paul, are you on a different screen? Because we can't see you're scrolling down.
I'm not, well, I'm just going for a different, I'm not scrolling down so much as going to a different slide, which is a snapshot of having scrolled.
No problem at all.
So I'm not scrolling down. So further down, so you can see the table of contents on the left, and basically what I'm doing is I'm taking snapshots at different stages of the same long page that contains all the index information. But the reason I wanted to show this is that it pulls out a list of all the cases that have been referred to in this content, or later cases which have referred back to that. All of that is also done by natural language processing, by scanning the content and pulling out cases and citations and matching them up against something that's in our index. So these processes, sorry, I jumped ahead again, enable us to provide the user with a list of suggestions of cases that they should look at. But I just want to go back to the results page, because one of the issues that we have is that although we've pulled in a lot of, we've got a lot of content where we've created basically summaries and analysis of the case, there are cases where we have little more than just a copy of the judgment. And so if you look at the second entry down in this list of results, the Unity Mark case, we've literally only got the name of the case and then a link to where we've got the judgment. And we haven't extracted any more information about that case. One of the things that we're now doing, what we're now doing in order to enhance the value of Case Genie, is to use generative AI to create quick automated summaries of new pieces of content. Now this, obviously for 150 plus years, we've been employing qualified lawyers to write up the cases, to write the head notes and the commentary on the cases and the index catchwords that we use. So we don't want to replace all of those people for the cases that are important enough to report. But those cases are a selection out of a vast brand tub of content that we don't have any intention of reporting. They're routine cases, they don't say anything new, they're not going to set a precedent. But people might still want to look at them in order to understand, you know, they might want to find some hidden gem, or it might be that it's a new case that hasn't been reported yet. And if they had some way of understanding more about what they might be looking at from the results page, we think that would make it more useful to them. So we wanted to write these brief summaries. At the moment, what we do is we extract sort of the first 100 words of the judgment, which is sometimes, you know, quite a good indication of what the case is about. But sometimes the judge will go off on a tangent and quote from Shakespeare or something that might be entertaining, but doesn't actually tell you very much about the case. So we've been looking at other suppliers, and one of the people who do this sort of thing is a Canadian company called Canly, which is managed by Lexham. And they have done some experiments with using ChatGPT, I think it is, and they've called it Catly. And they've featured this little picture of a cat, which was the one that was a lawyer mistakenly put in their online case hearing instead of themselves. I think their daughter put it there and they couldn't get rid of it, but it's become quite famous as a meme as a result. So this is an example of an automatically generated summary, and it's not our site, it's a Canadian site, but it's something that we are looking into doing on our site. So that would be a further use of AI to enhance the value of our product. I think I've probably spoken for long enough now. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. I think we're probably going to have some questions at the end, especially regarding the generative AI. And yes, I do remember the infamous cat lawyer. Yes. I think that appeared on the BBC News for his ire, but so do they. I'm going to hand over now to EBCONT.
So have you removed my share screen?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's all sorted now.
Thanks.
So I'll hand over to EBCONT with Frank and Gregor. Gentlemen, it's over to you.
Wonderful. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for the handover. My name is Gregor Sieber. I'm Executive Vice President at EBCONT, and I've got with me Frank Blau, who will be doing the majority of the talk today and of the work. I think this is kind of the setup that we appear to be having in the company. So my honor is to do a quick introduction of what we do at EBCONT, and I think that will feed quite nicely into what Frank is going to talk about. I'll actually leave it up to you, Frank, then to introduce the details of your talk. Just a quick bit of background about EBCONT. We are a longtime partner and integrator of MarkLogic, and some of the tools that kind of like to sit on top of MarkLogic, and also some of the tools that MarkLogic likes to sit on top of, like some of the major cloud providers. Our focus is really on delivering full-blown solutions to the customers, so we don't do just database work. We can really deliver on sort of from an idea down to the operations. Our customers do go across the board, but I was quite interested about the talk that we just heard. So some of these challenges are quite well known to us. We've been working with a lot of publishers more on the German-speaking markets and also in the US. But we do also have quite a lot of corporate or enterprise customers that have these challenges of having data in different formats, unstructured and structured, and trying to make sense of it. And Frank, if you could go to the next slide. And basically what we want to help them do is take that existing data and maybe augment it with some new data, external data, put it into MarkLogic, and then help them build these data-driven business apps that we all need to get our work done. And I think this is kind of the lead-in to what Frank is going to talk about, because this is very much about all of these different types of data that we have in the enterprise, how they work together, and how their representation matters very much. Enjoy.
So thank you very much. This is not going to be your a typical kind of presentation that you would see here. And part of the reason is I'm a strange person, but I came to IT through the world of literature, actually, and I'm wanting to be a writer and just wanting to have better tools for that. But along the way, I also studied media and a few other interesting things as well, guitars, as you can see in the background there. But I came across Marshall McLuhan at one point in my career. A lot of the early Apple people that we were talking about earlier were big fans of McLuhan also. And through the years, I've often gone back to McLuhan's work as my career in data architecture grew. And in the last couple of years, I came up with this idea that was based on something that McLuhan had said that most people know. Everyone has heard this quote, "The medium is the message," and not really dug into what it means. And that's what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to do it through the lens of data architecture and how you can use this sort of story, again, my literature background, in your work with talking to customers about data. And that's kind of what I'm going to do here. So when McLuhan said the medium is the message, it was a long time ago. It was 1964. I was 1 year old at that point. He was mostly talking about television, radio, and print and how they sort of evolved into each other and what that meant for us. But more than that, what he was saying was that the content of a message is one story. But the structure of the data is also another story that oftentimes you don't miss. That is how you're getting this information. What is it? How is it being delivered to you? And it's pretty easy to see how you can talk about that in terms of the world we live in today with the internet. Everything's all connected. It's almost like the medium as the message has become sort of like a de facto, almost a meme, I would say, about what we're doing. But there's something else about McLuhan that I really like, and that is that he didn't want for this to just hang out there as something someone said one time and then you ignored it. he wanted us to continue to interrogate it. He wanted to say, okay, if the medium is the message, what is my medium here? What is my message here? And that's where I started breaking it down in terms of data architecture, which is the work that I do. And my background is in my career background is almost all in business intelligence. I took some detours into robotics at some point, but it's about organizing data for insight, but not just any insight. We want to organize it around what we call actionable insight. And that is something you can act on. And that's really important when you're talking to customers. So I'm going to be talking about what I call data mediums. And we're going to kind of take a little brief, I don't want to say history here, but kind of where how we got there. And that slide doesn't belong there. Okay. So what was a medium? He was talking about any technology that extends our senses and awareness. And what that means is if you have data and you're organizing it, what you want to extend is your understanding of it. You want to extend your ability to do something. Watching this last presentation, I was like, yep, there you go. The medium is the message. How ICLR organizes their data is their story. It isn't just the content. It's how it's organized becomes the story too. And so the first story I want to tell is what I call the relational story. And I grew up in the world of before relational databases, really. And my first part of my career was based upon knowing how relational databases worked. But what is the relational story? Well, the relational story is I have groups of information that are connected to each other. I have customers, I have products, I have purchases, I have locations, I have information that is primarily transactional. And the way I describe the relational transactional story is I say, I need to know what stuff looked like at a point in time, primarily, transactionally. I need to be able to change things very quickly. These are the stories that we told people when we were selling OLTP databases back in the 80s and 90s, is that this was really important to organize your data this way. And even today, we still use almost all of these principles in our work with databases. It's good database design doesn't go away. But eventually, as we started putting data into these relational transactional systems, we got too much data. And it was a bad thing for some people, but it was really good for me because we learned how to organize data in a different way. And when I say organize data in a different way, I mean tell a different story, a different medium, a different message. And what we came up with was a dimensional story. And the dimensional story says, okay, I have all this transactional information, but I need to know, how much beer did I sell in the city of Dornbirn on Tuesday nights to males in a given age range? And it's a lot probably. But the relational database just couldn't do it. It couldn't keep track of this in a way that allowed my end user who had this very business question to ask, that is, they had a business story to tell, they couldn't do it easily. And we came up with dimensional databases or data warehouses, data marts, whatever you want to call them. They're still relational in nature, but they're relational and dimensional. That is, I create a fact about something and I attach the attributes in tables around it in what we call a star schema. And what this allows me to do is I can slice and dice my way through the data very quickly. I can say, how many blue shirts did I sell on Tuesday? Show me that by Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday also. This is very easy to do in a dimensional model because the story of the dimensional model is just that. I'm taking facts and organizing their attributes around them, which is very different than a relational transactional model, which is around representing those transactional facts. And again, let's come back to McLuhan for a second. I've changed my medium from a relational transactional to a dimensional. And my story changed also, my ability to tell a different story. There's another kind of story. And this is what we call a time series story. And in a time series story, I'm interested in things happening very quickly. Many people here understand what IoT is, for example, Internet of Things, sensors. I have sensors all around. If I could turn my camera around, you'd see my little pollution sensor. I have a weather station. I have all sorts of weird sensors around. I have sensors in my refrigerator and my freezer. My girlfriend thinks I'm a little crazy. And I graph it all. I store it in a database. But what time series data is about is really skinny data. That is, I have a sensor, a timestamp, and a value. The point of it, though, is I have lots of it. Data may be coming in at a millisecond level. I may be getting, in the case of, for example, say a heart sensor, like a EKG machine, 1,000 points of data per second in order to draw that pretty little EKG graph. I may be getting data in just at the second level for, temperature or something like that. But it's very skinny data. And I need to reorganize my data in a way that allows me to tell this story. And that's what a time series data store is. It actually organizes the data physically on the disk in a way that you can ask these very time-based questions about it. That's another kind of story. And again, back to McLuhan, the medium of time series is my message. When did something happen? What's the trend over time? And the ability to do that very fast is also the time series story. And this was great. So now we have transactional, dimensional, time series. But as we started writing applications to access this data, we ran into a problem. And the problem was I needed to get all the facts about a customer, be they time series, dimensional, relational, in one place as a message, because I was using what were called REST APIs to transmit this information between my data source and my applications. And so we came up with this idea of a document, typically JSON or XML. And now you're starting to hear the MarkLogic story. But we basically take all the facts associated with a particular customer or a particular event, or in what we saw earlier, a particular case, and we put it into this document database. And in a document database, what you have is all the information, whether it be the canonical data, the historical data, everything, all in one document, which is very convenient for writing applications. If your application has to always be making relational queries, for example, it sometimes gets very complicated. You get a lot of technical debt. As you make changes to your database schema, it affects all your developers. It's a mess. So this idea of documents, telling the story of all my facts in one place in order to communicate with an application, becomes really important. And again, like McLuhan said, we have a different medium, a document database, and a different message. All the facts in one place, able to move them around between applications. That's really cool. But there's another story, the resource data framework. And what these are is, I don't know why I skipped, doesn't seem to be going through my slides in the right order. Oh, I know why, because it went to, hold on a second, I'm gonna go back to where that slide is. It got knocked out of order here. Sorry.
It wasn't me. It
was you. I know it was. And this is one that I love because this is the story of literature. This is the story of words. This is what we call a semantic story. So we have Frank Blau was born in California. You have a subject, a predicate, and an object. And what's really interesting is as you start telling this story and storing the data in this way, Frank Blau was born in California. Frank Blau lives in Dornbirn, Austria. TEDx 2022 takes place in Dornbirn, Austria. If I organize my information this way, I can ask some really interesting queries that I wasn't able to ask previously. If I store data at scale, for example, in this way, I can say, show me all the people who grew up in California or were born in California and are somehow associated with are somehow associated with events that happened in Austria. And it's very easy to do these kinds of queries with millions, even billions of nodes stored this way. And again, this goes to a different kind of story. This is what we call a graph story. And a graph story is about the relationships having value. If you tried to model this, which you could in a relational database, but you end up with very complex schemas. And what we want to do is be able to leverage my data as it is in this context. So what we have, and now I have to skip past a million slides to get back to where I was, sorry, is this idea of storing data as a graph database where I have all these nodes. If you think of Facebook or LinkedIn, where you have your friends of friends, your friends of friends of friends who belong to a group of alumni for a college or something like that. And you want to be able to query, hey, who's associated with that? Who is close to that? These kinds of queries can happen in milliseconds on massive data sets with graph technology. And so we want to be able to leverage these things. So we've told a couple of stories, but where do we go from here? And what I say is we live in a multi-model world. It is the rare client that actually has just one type of story to tell. They may have, I think I heard from again, I'm going back to ICLR, was a great tie into this, is that they actually tried to put it all into a relational database and realized the limitations of that. And I'm sure we can come back to a good conversation about that, because their data is multi-model. It has some aspects of relational, transactional. They may have a data warehouse somewhere. They have applications talking to each other through APIs, I'm sure. And they might even have some time series data. And this is the world that we live in today, and is a multi-model world. So McLuhan's arguments have now kind of exploded. It's like, okay, the medium is the message. Oh my gosh, I got 50,000 messages, right? I have all these different kinds of stories going on inside my organization. So you need a multi-model platform. And what you need is in essence, is what we call a multi-model database. And this is where MarkLogic comes in. MarkLogic is able to tell these stories natively. I don't need to, for example, create a separate relational model on my documents. MarkLogic does that for me. I don't need to create these RDF triples, these little sentences about my data, because MarkLogic does that for me automatically. Now, you still have to have good data architecture. That doesn't go away. You still need a Frank, you still need someone that can basically walk you through how to set this all up. But once you set this up, you're able to leverage these stories, these different kinds of stories, document, semantic, relational, into your entire data fabric and use them seamlessly across each other. I can tell you, I have a customer now who has a very large MarkLogic database, and they think of it as a document data store. That's what they think of it as. And when we start showing them that you can treat it as a relational reporting source also, using Power BI, Tableau, Qlik, Python, whatever you want to do, transparently, without going through an ETL layer. That is, you don't have to transform the data in order to access it in that way. It's there natively in that way that you can query it. Sometimes their eyes bug out. It's really fun to see people understanding. And then when you start showing that you can do semantic queries with tools like Sparkle and stuff like that, you can start asking the kinds of queries that graph databases excel at, again, natively in the fabric of MarkLogic. It's a really powerful story, because that is the world that we live in. You may, for example, have some complicated query. I apologize for the size of this. There's a little tiny thing you probably can't even see. This is a little bit of code running over here trying to get some results from something, right? I think it's JavaScript code, right? But what it returns it to you as is this nice, clean document over here that you can process. And again, this is one context of my data. This is what I would call a story. My story is I have some JavaScript and I need to return to an application, something that can be consumed by an application, a document. And MarkLogic does that natively. And so in this multi-model world, we can play with this. We can also go into the world of semantic queries. And what you see on the left here is an example of a graph inside of MarkLogic, where I say, department has hours of that they're open. Employee has, what do we have here? A job review. And these are sentences, but I didn't build this separately from MarkLogic. This is actually something that comes with MarkLogic as soon as you define your schema. It actually says, oh, you have a schema? Cool. Here's the triples associated with your schema. And I can run these MarkLogic graph queries natively. Whereas in a lot of other instances prior to sort of my life with MarkLogic, there was no life before MarkLogic, don't worry. But in that world, I had to create a separate database. I had to create a separate graph database to solve those problems. And with MarkLogic, you don't have to. You have the RDF triple store already there to ask these really cool kind of graph queries at scale. Very, very performant. But you also have in MarkLogic something that I've spent a long time in my career doing, and that is data integration. So if you need to bring data into MarkLogic, your story is, hey, that's really cool, Frank, but I'm getting data in Excel spreadsheets. I'm getting data in CSV files. I have a data warehouse for my master data. I need to marry all this stuff together. Well, guess what? There's a native MarkLogic platform, the Data Hub tool, that allows you to not only load your data, but I can model it in the best possible way using whether I want a graph perspective, a relational perspective. I can model it so that it gives me that actionable insight that I talked about earlier. And then I can curate it. I can clean things up. I can publish things. I can have different versions of things. I can have highly temporal data. That is, I can have versions of things where I have the start time of something and the effective date of something, and I can track those over time. What we would do in a data warehouse with, say, a slowly changing dimension is built-in native document technology in MarkLogic. And then I can also explore, which is really important to a developer like me. It's really cool that I can do all this stuff, but then I go in and say, yeah, what are all my documents that look like this? What are all my documents that contain this? And what I'm doing there is I'm telling a story. And typically for me, the story is, did I get this right? Did I get my analysis right? Did I get my modeling right? And very quickly with these MarkLogic tools, I'm able to say, yep, I got it right, or yeah, I got it wrong. I need to remodel some things a little bit. I go back, I rerun my model, and now it's correct. So this is the power of this multi-model database world. And I know that I also want to say, as I wrap up here, that I specifically left out time series because MarkLogic is not a time series database, but you can interact with time series databases very easily from MarkLogic, because the configuration of your queries against your time series database are also in sort of very MarkLogic friendly architectures like JSON documents or XML documents that I can just pass to a time series database, get those results back, and use them in this fabric. So my conclusion is to think about Marshall McLuhan. He's a super cool guy to read about. He's written some amazing books. The Gutenberg Galaxy, The Mechanical Bridegroom. These are all books. They're a little bit dated, I would say. They're from the 60s and 70s typically, so they have like advertising stuff from the 70s as his examples. But they're very powerful books to read if you can extend your lens, as he would have wanted us to do, to the world that we're in today, interconnected, AI, all that kind of good stuff. So that's my conclusion. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, Frank. That was really good as always. I've seen a number of your talks recently, and like I say, he's always a good presenter. So yeah, thank you very much. We'll come on to some questions and some comments at the end, but yeah, I like to say it's sort of data in context, and you use story there. So yeah, no, it was really good. Up next, we have Mitch Shepard from our product management team. He's going to be talking about our Python client API, giving us a quick overview and some instructions on that. So, Mitch, over to you.
Fantastic. Let's see. Tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Mitch Shepard. I'm a product manager on the MarkLogic Developer Experience team. Some of you may have seen me on previous Bright Talks with the MarkLogic community events talking about our new Spark connector or ML Express, which is a VS Code extension for MarkLogic. Today, I'm excited to be talking about our Python client API and about how we are now,
Mitch,
building
sorry,
on.
sorry, Mitch. Some people are having trouble seeing your screen. I'm seeing your BrightTalk screen and not your presentation.
Oh, gotcha. Would you mind then, James, would you share my presentation? I know I sent it to you, and I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues today, but we might just run through that if that's okay. Or Phil?
No worries. Let me pull that up now for you.
Perfect.
I'll have to do it within 2 seconds. Sorry. Just want to make sure you can see it properly. It says waiting for PowerPoint to kick into gear. There we go. And here is the screen. There you go.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for that flexibility. So today we'll be talking about the Python client API. I'll just give you a quick overview of the connector or the client API, a highlight of its core functionality, and I think we'll kind of tackle any Q&A at the end collectively. So before we get into this, the Python request library, like previously, before this, the client API came out, a MarkLogic user was able to integrate with Python natively out of the box using the Python request library. This specific request library allows Python developers to easily create applications that would connect to MarkLogic's REST API. And then with the Python client API, it further simplifies the usage of that request library by supporting common authentication types and also improving the user experience with some of the more common endpoints when using that REST API. So for those of you that aren't aware, we recently just published a blog post on how a user could use Python to interact with data with MarkLogic. I'm not seeing a tab where I can easily post it in a chat, but I'll ask Phil or James to at some point post that. Essentially, we walk through a lot of the functionality for, hey, here's a way to, using Python, create a MarkLogic role, create a MarkLogic user, load your data, search your data, update the data, creating a view, say using a TDE, and querying for rows. And then after all of this is said and done, what is a Python user looking to do? A lot of times get it into a pandas data frame to then perform any of their analytics with pandas or NumPy or their favorite Python library of choice. So all of that, and back up a slide if you don't mind still. All of that is really kind of a precursor to the client API, what we're trying to achieve here. And Phil, I apologize. I'm seeing the quote slide. If you don't mind jumping to the overview slide.
It should be on the overview slide. It might be slightly delayed there for you.
We got it. Thank you. So 3 of our core goals that we want to highlight is trying to create a greater experience for our customers that are using data science or machine learning and Python. This is really going to make it a lot easier to kind of interact and do these things with MarkLogic. We want to make it easier for our users that are using Python to create their applications with MarkLogic. The client API makes it easier to support a lot of the out-of-the-box MarkLogic authentication types in those applications. And then this blog post is one of those examples of how we can document common examples, make it easier for a developer or user to know, what are some of the recipes? How can I easily get my data into MarkLogic using Python? How can I search it? How can I do these common tasks that, were previously a little bit more difficult to find? So now they're all kind of documented in one place, and we'll share that link. All right, pop over to the next slide. So who are our core users? All these kind of scenarios are focused around a Python app developer and a data engineer, right? An app developer is going to be wanting to use Python and building their application, supporting these authentication strategies. A data engineer is going to want to batch insert or batch write multiple documents with MarkLogic and Python. Before that, let's see, you can jump over to the next slide. Before this client API came out, performing these batch read and writes was really difficult. These multi-part mixed requests, although possible with the HTTP requests and our MarkLogic REST API, out of the box, it may have been a little bit more confusing and difficult to prep up. Before this client API, a user would have to essentially perform HTTP requests using the Python request library, and additionally, without this client API, if a user were, say, to use the new MarkLogic Cloud that's soon to be released, they'd have to have some sort of knowledge of how to obtain and renew their tokens. All of these problems are kind of solved with the new client API, and that we're supporting a handful of those client authentication strategies with the new MarkLogic Cloud coming out, Digest, SSL. It's really building on top of that request library and making these things a lot more out of the box. Additionally, we've addressed making it easier to read and write batches of documents with that client API as well. All right. I think one thing before I wrap up in this kind of client API functionality is this is a V1 release, right? Like we released just a handful of weeks ago, and are looking for feedback on what additional functionality or capabilities would help users be able to further interact with Python. We've received a handful of kind of feedback to better manage eval requests or additional REST API capabilities. So if shout out to any of our users that are interested in using Python with MarkLogic, if there are specific functions or capabilities that you might be interested in having supported by the client API, please reach out in the chat, and we'd love to chat with you some more and get an idea of what your use cases are and see if we can address some of those needs. So this is very much high-level overview of our Python client API. It is available right now. You can go and import it and do a pip install of MarkLogic, and we can send out a link to the GitHub repository as well for more information and documentation.
Yep, perfect, Mitch. Thank you very much. All resources will be shared after the event. So anything that we've mentioned today, any of the content that's been shown, we'll make sure that you get a copy of and links to. So we're just going to quickly cover off some future and previous events, and then we'll go rapidly into the Q&A. So let me just share my screen now. So recently we just had, and it's been mentioned on the event already, generative AI and combining your data with that. We had a really good event, really successful event, and the link is there. I would recommend checking it out. We had the feedback that we had from one person is it really shows how MarkLogic's architecture supports Gen AI and can improve the trustworthiness and the accuracy of the results. And I think it also speaks to Frank's point about capturing human subject matter expertise in your data and then scaling that beyond where it is. Speaking of that, next meeting we have an introduction to Semaphore. We've got a lot of new customers with us, and we've also got our fellow Progress customers that are new to MarkLogic and Semaphore. And so we're going to be introducing the Semaphore platform. There's going to be a demo. And then we're also going to be joined by Novo Nordisk's Saritha Carusico, who is their Senior Director of Data Representation. She's going to be talking through FAIR data, its impact on data, the challenges, and some of the lessons that are being learned about the implementations of that. So we're really looking forward to that on the 26th of October. Then on the 18th of October, so just a week before that, we've got our follow-up to the AI event. which is leveraging AI in the enterprise. And it is looking at why semantic knowledge is so important for a trustworthy enterprise AI. Why bringing your data into context before you put it into the Gen AI is so important, and also reflects what you're going to get back from the AI. So please do join us there. Link, as always, on the right-hand side. So without that, we've got some more events coming up. Like I said, we've mentioned Semaphore. We've got a geospatial event with our partners, Sensing Clues and Clever Llamas in November. That's going to be really interesting. And then we're going to have a short holiday break in December before joining us back in January. So any questions? Let me just come out of here and stop sharing the screen. We've got some questions here. I'm going to jump into it because we're over the hour already. But like I say, I would say that if we've got any questions, we'll stay on. But does the new Python client support rotating key authentication? Mitch, all of those words mean something, not to me. So let's hand that one to you.
That is a great question. Rotating key authentication. I'm wondering if you're referring to cloud authentication. I apologize. I'd probably ask you a couple follow-ups. Right now, it is very much path through. So if MarkLogic is able to support it, then the client API should be able to support that. If you are referring to something else, I would love to connect with you and better understand your use case.
Perfect. Yeah. If you ask a question, we'll make sure to reach out to you anyway with any specific follow-up information to your question. One point that I wanted to mention, and I think we've kind of touched on it a lot, which is this the thing outside is Gen AI. Paul, it was great to see your story from inception through to MarkLogic to then looking then at Gen AI, and I think that's a really good story to tell there. And what's your experience has been like with that at the moment?
You mean my experience with customers or with
using Gen AI and Case Genie?
I mean, when ChatGPT was launched, I played with it initially, and I thought, well, this is possibly a bit dodgy, to rely on this. There's quite a strong element of garbage in, garbage out. I think it's kind of trained on data, which I don't think is necessarily entirely trustworthy. So I think what you need to do is you need to be fairly careful about how you're using generative AI, and you need to check the results. But in what we have noticed is in the sort of 6 to 9 months since then, probably a year now, the people that we talk to who are lawyers and librarians, academics and so on, their attitude to generative AI is changing, and people are beginning to accept that it's a tool that you can use, providing you can master it, that you don't have to be at the mercy of its vagaries, as it were. And so frequently, I mean, we've been to conferences where all the talks given at the conference are about some form of AI.
Yeah.
And all the exhibitors who are sharing the exhibitor hall with us are talking about their AI product. So we felt very smug, really, that we had actually, we've got a product ourselves, and we would say, yes, we have our AI baby too, isn't it adorable? Yeah. And we're working on other things. And, people are ready to talk about it in a serious way and to use it as a tool and not to be mastered by it. What we've noticed is there were stories about the New York judge who castigated counsel because they produced some completely fake case citations, which ChatGPT had come up with. So, it does hallucinate. There is that issue, that risk. But more recently, an English, quite senior judge, a Lord Justice of Appeal, has admitted in an interview that he used ChatGPT to write part of his judgment. And he said, I checked it afterwards, and it was just a very convenient way of me not having to sort of just type the whole thing out myself. I asked it a question, and I checked its answer, and it was correct. And I thought it expressed it in a very neat and condensed way that was very useful. So he made a use of it, but he wouldn't have done that without checking it, because his reputation would be on the line if he included it in a judgment. And I think
100%.
we're starting to see that with customers who are saying, well, we would be happy to use this if we know we can trust it, and if we know that it's kind of got checks and balances.
It's it's really interesting. The event I was referencing to, the one we had last week, was demoing MarkLogic and using Semaphore, our semantic AI knowledge management tool, to basically give you context. I searched the knowledge graph before you prompt, so that you could get the correct information that you can provide additional context to the Gen AI. Ask your prompt, and then on the return, it checks that prompt or checks that retrieval for existing in the knowledge graph. So it helps the user then go, is this hallucinating? No, because it's a real case. I can see it in the knowledge graph. I can go to the location exactly where it is. And I think that's an interesting way. So yeah, if you haven't seen that, I'd recommend checking it out, because I think it's a really neat and tidy solution to the problem, but it has more value than people realize in that upfront thing.
If I could too, one of the things we see,
Sure.
We're seeing requests about is, ChatGPT is one thing. ChatGPT is going out and sort of looking at the internet, right? And it's a little bit outdated, blah, blah, blah. You have to have some limitations around it. But what people want to do is use that technology of language models against their domain, not just the internet domain, which is, whatever that is, that's where you get the hallucinations from. But my domain, whether that be my internal corporate data, whether that be something else, and how you get from your data to a natural language query of it is not just ChatGPT. You have tools like LangChain and vectorization and stuff like that that go into that you have to really understand. I sympathize what you said about going to conferences and seeing everybody talk about AI, because I'm like, half it isn't even AI. So but it's something we're seeing too. People ask us about, how do I take my corpus of data that I know about and convert that to something I can ask those kinds of questions of? Again, the medium, the message. I say again.
100%. And connecting your data, wherever your data is, to the AI, I think is going to be the key winning strategy for businesses. They will be able to leverage their internal subject matter expertise at scale by applying ontologies and taxonomies, fact extraction of the data, looking at the knowledge model for that, the relevant information in that query, and then getting that into the AI. I think that's a more intelligent way of doing prompting, rather than just sort of relying on an AI that hasn't even seen your data. It's never seen the proprietary data in your business.
Well, you're also going to have a whole new body of data to look at. That is your generated data. And I'm actually, not to self-promote too much, but I am going to be speaking at the Frankfurt Book Fair about CMSs and how they can really leverage what you're doing with this generative AI, because we're generating more data than we know what to do with. We're generating more content than we know what to do with. And so the idea of, again, going back to metaphors about Gutenberg and, things like that, movable type, being able to organize your data in a way that becomes usable and not just, I have a lot of it, is really important. And I think that's the revolution that's in front of us right now, is generated data content management.
Read the legal cases. What NLP engine do you use to perform the entity recognition and tokenization, if that isn't a proprietary thing for yourself?
Well, we built this in-house, but I know that we used some products from elsewhere, but I can't. I think one of them was something called Word2Vec. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. Unfortunately, I come from a legal background rather than a technical background, so to some extent, I'm not really equipped with completely.
No problem at all.
One thing we'd definitely say to anyone out there looking at a similar thing is that I think you guys implemented Case Genie before we purchased Semaphore. So if someone's got a similar discussion, please do reach out. These are many features that Semaphore can do, and obviously next month we'll be looking at that. So please tune in for that.
Yeah.
One quick question I had, Paul, was what's your customers' response been to Case Genie? How have they adapted to it? What's their thoughts?
Well, that is interesting. I think what we found is that when we give demonstrations, when we let people have a trial, they enjoy using it. But we don't get the impression that a lot of people are using it kind of in earnest, as it were, day to day for their research. I think they like to have it there. It's one of the problems with something like this is that it's kind of a black box system. You put the data, you put your own data in, you get the results back. And you can't really query it to say, well, why have you suggested this case? Why have you suggested that case? This is one of the reasons why we want to be able to provide automated summaries or other ways of providing more information about the case, so that at any rate, when you've put in some query or some data, you can see something of a connection with what you've put in and what you've got out. Because I think at the moment, you get something like we set the maximum at 50 cases. It will recommend up to 50 cases. But very often, quite a lot of those might be apparently, not relevant to what you're interested in. But it's very striking. If you put in a query, it could be very striking what replies you get, what suggestions. You get 1, 3, and 5 will be completely on the point and very useful. And then 2, 4, and 6 will be apparently quite irrelevant, or you kind of think, well, how did you get to that? It's a bit like lateral thinking or something. It's kind of a bit weird. I think if there were some way of trying to explain what the connection might be, and I don't know whether generative AI can do that, but that's the reason why we want to get these summaries there. We want to get other information, maybe to help the customer or help the user to see what the connection might be.
That's certainly something we should talk more about, as well as one of the things in Semaphore is it's rules-based. So you can actually, when you get a result set, you can go back and say, these were the rules that fired, and this is why we found those connections and what those links are. But more on that next month.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not there yet, but where this world of rule-based stuff meets the world of analytics is going to get really interesting. The analytics about my rules engines, for example, the sort of the DevOps side of AI is going to be really interesting. And I think that MarkLogic is uniquely positioned to be able to sort of surface that information in a way that makes it usable. So it'd be cool to see where this goes.
It's an interesting thing. The more you read on the topic, the more you find that there's these fundamental questions that researchers at the world's leading universities are trying to tackle.
Yep.
Especially when it comes to uncovering the mind or the intelligence within the AI. Like, why did you make that decision? It's easy for us to explain things relatively as human beings because we have this context that we have in our heads all the time. We only exist in a 4-dimensional world, with time and that. But the AI, ChatGTP, for instance, has over 12,000 dimensions of data points that it takes. The warmness of the language used, the coldness, the appropriateness, all of these dimensions it applies to the data to give it that score. And so it's a completely foreign way of looking at the world. And so bridging that gap between man and machine becomes even more important. And I think, like I say, rules-based analytics, but rules-based interrogation of the data and then the AI will play a key part in the near future. So I think that is everything. We've gone over a quarter of the hour, and I know I pretty much could speak to Frank and Paul all day long about this topic, but we will let them get back to things. Thank you very much for everyone that's still with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And thank you to our speakers today. It's been really interesting to hear both of your discussions.
Thank you.
And, please do join us again in the future.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Cheers,
Peace
guys.
out.
Bye.